Hello, everybody. It's Romania Black, and we are on episode 13, technically season 2, episode 2 of Moriarty the Patriot. And I'm so excited by the start of this second season. We've got Irene Adler introduced. Mycroft is interacting with Albert. We've got Sherlock interacting with Irene. Mycroft has warned Sherlock about Irene Adler. He didn't explicitly say it, which is so frustrating because looking back on episode 12, the last episode, I was like, Mycroft, you can't just, you Sherlock, you Holmes boys can't make things simple for each other, can you? No, you can't. Mycroft just couldn't come out and say, hey, there's this woman that's going to approach you. She's dangerous. Nah, he couldn't do that. He had to speak in riddles because that's how these Holmes boys work, right? So we've got Irene Adler introduced. She's a really interesting character. I like her so far, but I don't trust her. I feel like she has, as per usual with Irene Adler's character in other iterations, there's a part of her, it's kind of like Catwoman and Batman. There's a part of her that you want to like her a lot as a character, but you just can't trust her. There's something under the scenes. And the way that the last episode ended was that it seemed like Albert was inviting her, or Moriarty was inviting her, to come to the dark side and talk with us. You know, don't just stick around with Sherlock, talk to us too. And I'm a little worried about that because Sherlock, he thinks that, Liam, that he doesn't know Liam's involved in all this. He just knows that Liam is fun to solve mysteries with. He doesn't realize that he's the criminal consultant yet. And I say yet, I think by the end of the season, he's going to figure it out, obviously, because that's the show. But he doesn't realize Liam's involvement. And I just worry that Irene is going to find, Albert and Moriarty are going to find a way to appeal to her, to get her to work with them, I feel. And it's gonna come back and bite Sherlock. That's what I'm afraid of. I feel like Mycroft's warning Sherlock. He's like, Mycroft is his brother. He knows he's emotional. And he's like, you're gonna get invested, and then it's all gonna come back, and it's gonna bite you in the butt. And it's gonna be like, oh. So, Sherlock and his blondes, though, right? He's got a type. I think Wooshin on Patreon said he was mystery sexual. I can go with that. So, I'm pretty excited. I talked with y'all on Patreon about episode 12. I do like the new OP. I think it's going to grow on me a lot. The ED, I like the visuals of the old ED more, but maybe this one will grow on me too. We'll see. I'm not going to reserve judgment. But I'm pretty excited to get into this episode and see it's part 2 of Act 2 of A Scandal in the British Empire. I don't think it's going to end on just 2 parts. It's going to be a 3-parter, which, of course, it's starting out season 2. Why wouldn't we? So, yeah, let's dive in, shall we? I'm pretty excited. I took a little bit of a break between episode 12 and this one, but because I was working on other shows, but I'm excited to get back into this. So let's do this. We're going to start episode 13 of Moriarty the Patriot here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. So, this episode was great. Oh my gosh. I liked this maybe better than the first episode. But I'm a big sucker for Albert. And he is a savage character. Oh my gosh. I'm glad to see more with Albert this season because honestly, I've really liked Albert's character from the start, even as a kid. And I feel like Albert's kind of this, he's not a midway point between Lewis and William, but Albert is a different, he's very much their equivalent of Mycroft, right? He's savage and he's direct and he's vicious. Like Mycroft does it in a very classy, he's bound within some range by the limits of his government capacity as termed as that title, but Albert is not. So Albert can do crazy things and get away with it because he's not bound by the government. But I wanted more in part 1. In season 1, I wanted more of Albert, and it was more setting up Moriarty's character than anything, and setting up Sherlock's character. So it focused more on them. But now seeing Albert more in this, oh man, I was wondering if they were going to lure Irene over to the dark side, and they kind of do. They kind of do, because Irene realizes that their ideologies are pretty much in line with hers. So, of course, she's tempted. I kept wanting to make reference to the BBC version of Irene because in her case, Irene Adler in the BBC version of Sherlock, she's very similar to this iteration. She's kind of wooed over by Moriarty, by the crime consultant, because he offers her protection. And in the BBC version, he offers her protection, and then she gets involved in a case that's too big for her. She gets too caught up in the game, and she also falls in love with Sherlock, which in this version, I'm like, they pretty much set up Sherlock and William to be the main pairing, but I do think Sherlock has some attraction to her. He's mystery sexual after all. But in the BBC version, she falls in love with Sherlock and kind of gets that the emotion overruns the logic in the game. And by the end of it, she ends up handing over the information to Mycroft and Sherlock because Sherlock figures out her game. And that's not how it's going down here, which I appreciate. I like that they're doing something totally different. But the idea that she goes along with Moriarty for so long because their ideologies are similar and because he offers her protection. But in this, it's really more that their ideologies are on the same line. In the BBC Sherlock, she really just does it for the protection and because he's, has that much power. But in this, it's not totally the case, right? But yeah, let's get into this episode. This episode was really, really well done. I love the idea that Albert, well, first, before we get to the masquerade bar, I love the idea of the masquerade ball. Like that, the whole thing, I kept thinking Sherlock was going to show up because that seems like it's right up Sherlock's alley. That the theme, but Sherlock's not a nobleman. He's not nobility, so he wouldn't be invited. But it seemed like the whole game seemed like it was right up Sherlock's alley. It seemed like it was made for him. Like, oh, the theme's the Lord of Crime. But if Sherlock was there, he'd probably guess who the guy was in like 5 seconds. So it makes sense why he's not there. But I had got my hopes up. But still, it's so brilliant. We'll talk about that. But first, Albert, yeah, it sounds like fun, brother. That's the one thing. Moriarty, William treating this like it is a game, this whole thing. It's just they have their mission, their whole mission and everything. But this little one aspect of it is a game. And that's kind of disturbing in a way because this game is literally Irene Adler's life on the line, that if it's discovered, which at this point they don't know what's in the documents. They don't know what's in the documents. They think for all they know it's a royal scandal and it's the royal family. So of course maybe that makes it seem more trivial to them, but it's still this woman's life's in danger and William's like, what a fun game. I'm gonna rely on you, Albert. And it's like, But yeah, so God. And they're just sipping tea, talking about it. Going to change the world, And then, yeah, William acknowledging this all started at Albert's request. Albert is the one that put this entire series in motion when he asked William to help reform society through crime, And then Lewis, Albert calling on him too. And Lewis is like, I'm willing to help it anyway as long as Sherlock's not involved. Like, he seems like so. And he says, yes, brother. I like that Lewis considers him, Albert, just as much of a brother. And we tie back to that first couple episodes. Our past, present, and future is all linked together, the three of us, And then I love that each of them holding, like William and Albert holding each of Lewis's hands, tying all three of them together. And the symbolism of the fire in this episode, when they talked about the guy that they killed, the Baron, and they talked about him burning down a theater, it connects right back to them burning down the mansion, right? Which we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that. That's interesting. But yeah, I love the concept of the three brothers. We three brothers are James Moriarty. And then it comes back in later on because, yeah, technically they are James Moriarty, are all three of them. I think Lewis's name, is it Lewis James Moriarty? I think maybe, and I know it's William James Moriarty and Albert James Moriarty. They all have James. Their names all connect to James Moriarty in some way, shape, or form. Right? Their names all connect to it. So it stands to reason, it makes sense why they're all three the versions of him. And when he tells Irene that he's Lord Moriarty, it's like, which I like that Albert does that because he orchestrated this whole thing, he doesn't pin blame and responsibility on William. He takes responsibility for it. He's like, this was all my idea and I'm taking credit for it. But I'm being James Moriarty in this case. It's going to be hard for them if they all pin that name on each of them. It's going to be hard for someone to pin down, oh, that's James Moriarty. No, that's James Moriarty. They're all James Moriarty. So I like that. I like that a lot. I think that's a really cool concept that these three brothers together are the Lord of Crime. It's not just one person. That's really good. So yeah, we'll skip the OP, even though I really like the OP quite a bit. But yeah, the idea of the masquerade ball, it's so good. And it's so perfect because they're going to flush Irene out of the crowd. Everybody in there doesn't speak of their true name, so nobody knows who's who. They're all wearing masks. And then the setup of it's just such a fun, it's a cool game. It's a cool idea. It's meant to be a masquerade ball, but the idea is that they put one person as the killer and they come by, and it's a riddle solving game. It's like a murder mystery, and the Lord of Crime is the murderer, and then their job is to try to figure out who it is. And I like the idea that it's so, there's multiple layers of it, because on the surface, the idea is to get people talking about Moriarty and to get talking about his ideals. And so in one aspect, it's getting him to talking about all the themes associated with Moriarty. That's on one end of it. Okay. And then on the second end of it, it's ratting out Irene, which was their true intention, right? And then on the third end of it, it's if you get murdered, which not a lot of people get murdered in this game, so interesting, but when you get murdered, you have to donate an item on you for money that's going to go towards rebuilding a college. So it's like, so we're doing our Robin Hood good deed. We're getting the nobility's money to help this college. We're doing our Robin Hood. We're robbing from the rich to feed the poor. And then, in a sense, and then we're also spreading around our ideologies free of charge. It's free real estate here. And then we're also going to murder a baron. So free real estate there. And then we're going to flesh out Irene. So there's lots of benefits to this whole thing. Albert's smart planning all of this. He really is. But I like when they tell people what they're going to do. And they're like, oh, you got killed. Ha, ha, ha. Kindly relocate to the upper floor. And then they are no longer able to attend the ball. So it's kind of like you don't want to get murdered, right? And you have to donate the most costly item you're wearing as penalty. And I like that woman who's with Albert, his date, seemingly, she with the butterfly mask, she gets like, oh, we have to donate our most costly item? Like, she gets a little flushed out at that, right? She gets like a little bit, not disturbed or anything. She seems surprised, right? Huh. But yeah, she's clearly his date. And he's like, ha ha, lady. I don't know who she is. I guess she's not really important. But yeah, so the Baron, the old Baron, they deliberately chose him to be the guy that is the murderer, right? And you see the people in the ballroom talking about Moriarty, saying that Scotland Yard has no clues as to who his identity is. The townsfolk say he's a hero. He's set on exposing the dark deeds of the upper class. And he's as well liked as great Detective Holmes. So establishing that him and Sherlock both have equal reputations within the city, right? I love it. As a symbol representing light and darkness. Oh, I love it. I love that so much. The idea that Moriarty is representing the dark underworld in London and Sherlock is the white knight representing the light. It's great. It's good stuff. Good shipping fodder, right? You have our yin and yang. And then, yeah, I like that this guy is just so flustered by it because maybe he feels guilty about all the crimes he's committed and he just doesn't understand it because he's the target, right? A criminal getting the Robin Hood treatment. And then, of course, Albert's like that debate kid. Albert is that debater that hears you arguing something that he clearly has the upper hand on. And he's like, oh, I see you're arguing about this topic I know so much about. Let me chime in with my opinions. I'm like, oh my God, Albert. And this girl behind him is like, what are you doing? But yeah, I love that Albert just instantly chimes in and calls Moriarty the chivalrous thief. And this guy's like, you sound like it's right that these people died. And Albert's like, oh, who said that? Ha ha ha. Albert is great. And the use of colors in this episode, the use of green and red, which is funny because green and red, we've associated red with Moriarty. And I always feel like even though Lewis's eyes are red, I feel like blue is always associated with Albert. Maybe the clothes he wears are always blue. But William definitely has red associated with him. We've seen green associated with Sherlock. So you have those two colors kind of clashing next to each other. But Albert is weird. And Mycroft, I always feel like there's a blue. And in this episode, there's a blue aura with Mycroft and Irene. So that's interesting. But with Albert, it's kind of weird because Albert has both red and green motifs, which is he always wears green. He has the green eyes, but he's always drinking like the red wine. In this episode especially, like the contrast of red and green is associated with Albert a lot. So it's very interesting. I really like the color symbolism in this. But yeah, and this guy's mask is green and red. It has the purple feathers, but it's green and red on the mask. So, I don't know. And then when he dies, his face turns like a horrid shade of green. So it's like, And it's funny because he chooses Albert as the first victim, and then Albert has already picked him as the victim. So it's a funny little duality there, right? But yeah, in the thumbnail for this episode on Funimation, when I went to click on it, it was a picture of Albert standing next to Irene in costume, and I didn't recognize it as Irene. And so when I was clicking on the episode, I was like, oh, who's this blue-eyed guy? Is he a new character? No, it's Irene. And you can tell by the mole. And at the time, I wasn't thinking about it. I was like, oh, yeah. But yeah, the poor girl, her date gets kicked out of the ball. And he donates that ring with the kind of jade in the middle of it. It's interesting. So this guy, the Baron that picked Albert to be the first victim, didn't even realize it was Albert, that he was an Earl. Interesting. I'm like, you think that it's kind of a commentary on how much the nobility don't pay attention to anything. Because like I said, if Sherlock had been there, Sherlock would have picked people out left and right because he's so good at deduction and he pays attention to all those details. This Baron guy didn't even recognize it was Albert. I'm like, Albert's like a famed Earl in nobility. People know, like the people in the crowd are like, Moriarty, Lord Moriarty. Like they all know him. You would think that this guy would have realized who it was, even with the mask on. But that just goes to show how much society in this world doesn't pay attention to details like that. Unless it's said outright. And that's, again, tying to the fact that nobody used their true names coming in. It's like, how much does the society care about who's who, and they don't really get to know the people in nobility itself. I don't know. And then, yeah, Irene outs herself as being a victim as well. Probably splashed some wine on herself. And then goes up to see Albert. And I love this conversation. The conversation that they have about all of this is just... it's so good because, yeah, it's establishing that Irene, her goals to change society are not that different from Albert and Moriarty's, or from Albert. I'm going to start calling it Albert and William because they're all James Moriarty, right? But yeah, and Albert's such a smooth liar because he just smooths everything over. He's like, I've been charged with by the government with this matter, which he technically has. And he says you can take my word as the word of the British government. It's like, okay. But then he completely refutes it by the end, being like, yeah, I was charged by the government to do this, but I'm also going to do my own thing. So... and Irene's like, I'll return the papers under my conditions. Like, she just wants to get out. She just wants to get out of the loop. She's like, I've seen too much. I know too much, but I don't want to die because of it. I just want to give my stuff to you and peace out and not have to deal with this. And it's not that simple. Yeah. And she's like, you have to guarantee my safety. And here's the thing of it. I would say that Mycroft, I'd be like, oh, well, if she had just gone to Mycroft, he would have forgotten. No, Mycroft's going to kill her. That was the idea. He's like, you have to liquidate her. Mycroft just didn't want to do it. He didn't want to bloody his own hands. So he's like, I'm going to hire Albert out to do it. And I can't remember from the last episode. I don't think that Mycroft is on to the fact that Moriarty is connected to Albert. I think he's just like, Albert, you're part of the military. You do it. You have the means. You get rid of her. And he's like, okay. But yeah, she's like, I want protection. I want to be overlooked for my crime. And it's like, those are some steep requests. And Albert's like, when he says no, he's like, nope, my job was to get the papers back and liquidate you. So I can't honor that on behalf of the government. That's not going to work. And I like that he just twirls the wine as he's thinking about it. So he says, my answer on behalf of the government is no. He's like, I was told by the government not to bargain with you. I'm just supposed to get the papers and execute you, and that's it. But Albert's like, I'm not in my non-government capacity, in my personal life, I can totally help you. And yeah. So, and I like that he says here, I missed that line where he's like, as part of the government, being in the capacity of the government, I didn't call you here for that. I called you here for my own personal reasons, right? I love that shot of Irene with the blue light around her and all the papers floating. It's such a beautiful shot. And then there's a shot similar to Mycroft at the end when Sherlock's like, he is the government, right? So, I mean, Albert, they all figure it out, right? They all figure it out. Moriarty is arguably, William and Albert and them are arguably a step ahead of Sherlock in this regard because they figure out the whole scope of the situation, and Sherlock doesn't really figure it out until after he looks at the documents. But yeah. And so, yeah, Irene gets mad because she's like, the only reason you brought me here then was just to tell me you're going to kill me and take the papers. That was it. And he's like, no. He's like, hold on, girl. He's like, I didn't finish. Let me finish. And then this whole idea is I'm here to say that I am able to save you. The idea of that's how they reel her in. That's how they reel her into their side. They're like, I can save you. We'll help you. Don't worry. You know, it's just going to be in the capacity of being Lord Moriarty. Mm-hmm. And I like that Albert's just chilling up here with his bottle of Merlot being like, I'm going to drink the whole damn bottle. He's like, I want to find out what's in the content of the papers. And he's like, it doesn't matter. Tell me what the papers contain. I don't care if I'm in the same boat as you. I clearly have more leverage because he knows Mycroft and he has friends in higher places than Irene does. And she's like, fine, I'm going to tell you. And yeah, it's pretty scandalous. We'll talk about this. But I love that Albert, this is exactly what he wanted. Like, his laugh in this scene, I was like, oh my God. Because this is perfect. This is a scandal not of just the royal family, but the whole system. And you can just, that look in his eyes, like how excited Albert is. This is like the cat that ate the canary. You just gave the cat an entire room full of birds, basically. Because this is perfect for them. Exposing this secret about the British Empire is exposing just how corrupt the entire system is, which is what they've wanted from the start. They're like, we don't want a system based on blood right. We want it based on people's merits. And if you're going to cause a riot and break down the establishment, this is the type of secret to do it. Right? And then Irene, Irene does not fully get why he's so excited about this information. She's just like, can you save me or not? And he's like, well, sure I can. And I love the idea, allow me to show you a sampling of the power that can save you. Like, he's like, let me show you what our crime consultant agency can do. And then, yeah, they kill the Baron. And it's a very interesting commentary. I get such Mask of the Red Death vibes from this episode, from this ballroom scene. I get such vibes from that story. But yeah, he's clearly like, he's ill. He doesn't feel good. He's like, he basically just chokes to death and dies. It's very Game of Thrones Joffrey style, Purple Wedding style death. But the crazy thing about all of this is that, yeah, they established why they decided to kill him, because 5 years ago he burned a theater for the insurance money and people inside died as well, and he didn't care if they died as well. And of course, they choose this one man with this exact crime as they're luring Irene in because some of her friends were the victims, and so she'd have a personal emotional stake in it. So it's perfect. Like, they picked the perfect victim for this because it's someone Irene can relate to and the opposite empathize with. She hates this man probably because he killed her friends and realizes, oh, these guys are they're killing these noblemen for the sake of helping those and avenging those that were killed. Okay. Yeah. Of course, it's the perfect setup. It's perfect. And then, yeah, and here's the tragic thing about it that's so morbidly hilarious is this man just dies. And, oh, that line, the Lord of Crime expires and peace returns once again to London. And there's that shot of Albert's, like, eyes glowing green. And it's kind of like, it's sort of the opposite of William's eyes when they glow red. It's the same thing, but it's just the opposite colors. So that line, when the Lord of Crime expires, peace returns once again to London, that's my one thing, is that their goal is to return peace and a new order to London. So when they get to that point, if they get to that point, hypothetically, I'm like, would the Lord of Crime expire? Would he? Or are y'all going to get so caught up in the games that you don't want to stop? That's the thing, right? And I'm wondering if Sherlock's ever going to comment on that or if there's going to be commentary. Because what if they achieve their goal, theoretically, And they establish that line, the Lord of Crime expires and peace returns once again to London. That seems like such a foreshadowing line. And it juxtaposed with Albert and his creepy stare. It just seems like such a line because it's like, okay, well, what if y'all get what you want and you do change the system in England and all this is, the establishment is completely revitalized, then what? You know, then what do we do? So I wonder if that's part of the theater, is that eventually they'll make the Lord of Crime die and that's it, right? And the idea that you're all the winners. That's the thing. That line, the Lord of Crime expires, peace returns to London, and you're all the winners. That's Albert's goal. His goal is to just get to where all the people are the winners, and it's not just the nobility. It's not just the 3%, right? Oh, it's such good foreshadowing and symbolism. But what I was getting at before that amazing line a moment is that this guy just dies. He literally just dies. Nobody cares. They just leave. They leave his corpse on the carpet. The guy is sitting there dead and they're like, call a doctor. And they keep on dancing like no one helps this man. He can't breathe. He can't speak. He's literally dead. Like he is just green he's ghastly. And they're like, oh, he's not breathing. Call a doctor. And then they just go along with the party like nothing happened. And Albert's like, isn't that tragic, right? Like they just leave him and go on. And I love the idea. The ideas talked about in this episode are really, really good. And I like the way that Albert presents them. And then again, as he's talking about the punishment, that blood red, that wine, it's so saturated. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. He's like, I set this whole thing up because I am the Lord of Crime. James Moriarty, which he's Albert James Moriarty, so absolutely. And Irene's like, really? You a nobleman? Huh? Okay. Sure thing. I mean, she has no reason not to question him. But yeah, even when a man dies, the aristocracy continues the party without a second thought. They're only interested in themselves. Which means that no matter how many aristocrats get killed like this, there is no changing them. I love that aristocracy doesn't refer to the people themselves, but to the very concept they embody. Yeah. And yeah, a person cannot kill an intangible concept. So I'm glad that we're addressing this, that they can kill all these noblemen. They can kill all the noblemen that they want. But at the end of the day, killing the aristocrats means nothing because like we see here, aristocracy doesn't care. They just move on. They're selfish. So he's like, we need to change the entire concept of nobility and how people react to it. So if the nobility aren't going to change, we've got to get to where there's an uprising, basically. We've got to get the people in the lower class to rise up. And that ties back to in episodes 2 and 3 when William was getting the kids being like, what do we do to mean aristocrats? And they're like, kill them. So it's like trying to form an uprising, forming a big riot, like a revolution. And so the papers that she's after, that's going to like spark what exactly he's wanting to spark. So it's like, it's all tying together. And then they just lure Irene in being like, we're not so different, you and I. And we tie back to that window that William was in front of, a free society based on one's merits. And it cuts back to Albert being like, I've killed my brother to reform this world. Like, I've sacrificed, and we're going to use it through crime. He's like, you resort to theft and extortion to get your methods done. So how are we any different? Yep. And yeah, you can tell Irene's just like, okay, we're on the same page. I was honestly fooled by the whole blowing up of the window thing. I did not expect Sherlock. I didn't expect Mrs. Hudson to be okay with Sherlock and Watson blowing up the second floor. I was like, how is Miss Hudson so calm in this scene? But if you think about it, Mycroft, Sherlock establishes that his brother is the government. So in that case, if you think about it that way, then he's probably going to reimburse Mrs. Hudson if they get Irene in the papers. He's probably going to reimburse Miss Hudson and rebuild her second floor. But still, that's blowing up the entire second floor. That's, Miss Hudson, I'm glad you're on board with this. Because I was like not expecting her to be on board with it at all. And it kind of makes sense looking back. Sherlock's wounds and Watson not looking wounded at all when their flat just blew up. I was like, there should have been more blood, and they probably should have been dead. That should have been hint number 1. Hint number 2 is that Mrs. Hudson is right there waiting on her when they show up. It's like, okay. But in the moment, Irene is so shocked, and it's like, you wouldn't expect them to blow up their flat, that she's like, oh, okay. And then Sherlock tells her to run, and she's just so, like, her eyebrow twitching. She's just so panicked in the moment. She's like, I'll go grab the papers and go. And that's when they find... It's a good thing she had those papers downstairs and not in Sherlock's. For a second, I thought the papers blew up in the flat with Sherlock. I'm like, that would have sucked, because that would have been the end of the whole thing. I thought what was going to happen is that her papers were in Sherlock's flat and it blew up. And then she was like, okay, what do we do now? And then she was just going to have to tell them what was going on. But nah, she hid them downstairs. And then Sherlock has the papers, and he takes them back from her. And so they read it. So basically the whole idea behind it was that it was, let me go back here. Go back to that part. That they're tactical plans. And so basically Albert's telling Lewis, I like that Fred's pulling the little cart. That's cute. That 100 years ago, the glorious British Empire secretly manipulated the French Revolution, surprising no one, you know, and that those are the plans for it, to show basically a social experiment. And Moriarty William looks pleased as punch. A social experiment to find out what happened if an oppressive absolute monarchy was shipped to become a republic oriented around citizenry. So yeah, the British government's like, I wonder what would happen to this nation if this happened. Let's test it out. And so, yeah, I mean, it was a win-win situation for the British government, because in this scenario, they get to test out what it would be like for this societal shift to happen. And then if it doesn't work out and throws the French government into turmoil, it's no skin off the British Empire's back. So yeah, this is very scandalous indeed. And Albert's like, oh no, what if the people find out that this happened and that their government's a sham? Oh no, you know? And so Albert's like, we need to get our hands on those papers. We have to, in order to spread it throughout the nation and, you know, further our cause, right? There's no turning back on us now. That was definitely the theme of this episode. There's no turning back. There's no turning back for the Moriarty crew. There's no turning back for Irene. There's no turning back for Sherlock Watson and Mrs. Hudson at this point. We're all involved. And yeah, I love the idea that Sherlock's like, there's no way that she's working with a third party. There's no way that Mycroft would set this whole thing up, because Mycroft's too smart for that. That's not his style. Sherlock's like, that's not my brother's style to work stealthily like this. It's clearly somebody else. And then by deduction, by, you know, limiting our options, it's probably Moriarty. I like, though, that she says that her whole route down this path of being kind of in the same boat as the Moriarty crew is that one of her friends was driven to commit suicide because she was from a common family and she could never get any further in her career. And it ties back to that little girl that Irene saw in the last episode get picked on. And she's like, don't listen to them. You can become a great actress. And like tried to inspire her because she saw her friend in that little girl and didn't want the little girl to suffer like her friend did. Makes sense. Makes all the sense in the world. But again, the colors of purple and green and red, because in this scene where the woman dies, she's like all in red. The poison is purple, and then the faces of the laughing aristocrats are all green. And in that scene back there in the masquerade ball, you had the nobleman who had the purple feathers, and then the mask had green and red. So it's interesting. We have green, red, and purple established here. And we know that Sherlock's flowers are violets. So interesting color combination, right? Right? So yeah, and we get established that Irene has been helping children all this time, that she like takes kids in and helps them to, you know, foster their talents and expand upon them so that they can find a place in the society despite what everybody thinks. So it's like, you know, she's trying to do good deeds, but there is some ill intention with it too, right? And then Sherlock figures her out. And so he gives her the papers, and they're clearly going to follow her to figure out. They're clearly going to chase her. They're going to follow her to figure out what's involved. They're like, here's your papers, you go meet up with whoever, but they're clearly gonna follow her and try to see who she meets up with. So, and in that carriage, it was Lewis and William and Albert. They're all going to meet her theoretically, unless this is, you know, still too early in the evening. But Sherlock tapping his feet when she leaves, and he's like, quit monkeying around, damn it. He's like, I know you're lying. I know you're lying to me. And he gets mad because he's like, what she says isn't true. We have no choice but to follow her and figure it all out. And Watson's like, how do you know that she's lying? And he's like, her reasoning with the government's untrue. My brother is the government. That's not how he works. And it's not that simple. And yeah, the idea of playing Mycroft in the blues. So yeah, I love it. And then that last shot at the end there with all them going to meet her. That's such a good shot. That might be the thumbnail of all three of them going to meet with her. That last shot of them exiting the carriage. It looked like they were about to get into the carriage. They're leaving the mansion where the ball was. But yeah. And in that shot, it's red. William's red tie. Albert's green. And Lewis has blue. Oh my gosh. This episode was really good. It was really good. Really good. There's so much to think about. I think that Sherlock is going to follow. He's going to let Irene go meet up with them, and then him and Watson are going to follow from the shadows to figure out who Lord Moriarty is. But she thinks it's Albert, so she may tell Sherlock that it's Albert. But we know that Sherlock probably thinks if he sees all three of them together, he's going to think it's William. So I want Irene to live through all this, but I'm very skeptical because there's a part of me that's like, oh yeah, Irene will live. And there's a part of me that's be like, Mycroft's going to kill her. And there's a part of me that's like, no, William's going to kill her, but no, maybe not. I don't know. I feel like if Irene joins Moriarty's side, they're like so one-sided. They have Moran, they have Fred, they have Albert, Lewis, William, and Irene. That's like 6 people. That's like a squad, you know? And then you have Sherlock and Watson and Mrs. Hudson. And then Mycroft's off by himself with the government. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with her character and how they're going to treat it in this anime. Don't spoil me, but I don't know what's going to happen. So yeah, there's clearly a part 3. I'm pretty excited about it. So I hope y'all are too. I hope y'all like this reaction. This was a really good episode. I'm very curious to see what's going to go down in the next episode if it's Act 3. Very curious. So I guess we'll find out. But in the meantime, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with more Moriarty the Patriot. Bye.